Brad going to be able to join us?
I haven't heard. Hopefully he's just stuck in traffic on the way back from New Bedford. Well, hopefully not stuck in traffic, but hopefully on his way.
Does he work in New Bedford every day?
4 days a week? Well, so I mean, that's where his office is, but a lot of his work is all along the shoreline south of Boston
Must be fun
for
for
Fisk,
traffic.
so he drives a lot. Yeah, I don't know how he does it. Fridays, he stays local, but 4 days a week.
Ever seen that quote?
I have not seen it, but it definitely makes sense. Yeah.
One more minute. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Call to order. There he is. Hey, Brad. Call to order the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission for August 3rd, 2022. First, this will be a hybrid meeting. There will be people that are here in person as well as individuals that are dialing in remotely. Access information get in on remotely is available on the town website under the Conservation Commission department. And the first item we have on our agenda is a request for a determination of applicability for 15 Lake Drive, map 25, parcel W1-8B for proposed vista pruning. And I believe it's yours.
Best here or here? Or
Either
Whichever
one.
you're comfortable with is fine.
Wait, sit with you if I may for a while. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Introduce yourself. For the
Oh,
record.
sorry, my name's Sebastian Arcelis, one of the two owners with my wife, Stephanie Block Arcelis, of 15 Lake Drive in South Harwich. We purchased the home in 2017, in the summer of 2017, and needless to say, it's our happy place. And we, as a introduction, our hope always is to preserve the sanctity of the pond and the wetlands and the surrounding area. We're honored to be a part of this community, and we thank you for the opportunity to speak with you guys today. What we're here for is the vista pruning, as per the documents I submitted, for about a 25 to 27 foot space at the edge of our property. It's an interesting property because at the end of it, there is this ancient way, sort of a common land that 3 or 4 different properties, I guess, share or share use of. So when bringing this particular proposal or request to your attention, we wanted to be respectful of what our neighbor's view of the pond might be. So we tried to limit that space and bring to you a proposal that put the put the plant life and the wetlands and sort of a holistic pruning to the forefront. Obviously, the nature of the request is one for, accessibility of view, but in our estimation, the health and sanctity of wetlands is first and foremost. So, should it pass, we would be obviously open to whatever considerations were necessary for proper execution of the said vista pruning. Dan Dewey of Dewey Gardens is our sort of organic, holistic-minded landscaper. He's incredible, and he has been really consistent and helpful in maintaining what we hope to have a sort of a natural wild garden, and this would obviously work in the same way. My letter, I guess, to the committee is pretty much of the same note, but we would obviously be selective and discriminate and follow whatever guidelines you deemed necessary for healthy viability, viable shrubs and maintaining the sanctity of the wetlands. So I'm happy to, I guess, address any questions or issues that you have. I'm an actor by nature, and I'm nervous. There's actually, it's my job.
It's a little intimidating, isn't
It's
it?
amazing. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Forgive me for going on a tangent, but there's a play, or it just closed actually on Broadway called The Minutes. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. Tracy Letts, who wrote August Osage County, he's an extraordinary playwright, wrote a play called The Minutes that addresses sort of a town meeting. And yeah, for someone who does this for a living, I'm it's a little intimidating. Dude, I know, it's really something. I mean, I'm a public speaker by nature. Anyway, bottom line is, that's what we're hoping to do, but thank you
for that
for
explanation. That was helpful. Generally, we go to Amy next and ask her for her feedback and comments on the project.
So Sebastian and his family has been great with working with Melissa and I on the preparation of their application and taking our guidance for the pruning area. Their house is situated farther back from the pond, so this 25-foot-ish windows is a pretty narrow window. What's in that view corridor right now, which has historically been pruned with our approval by an abutter, but it's been a couple of years. That abutter hasn't been around as much, and so it's kind of gotten overgrown. So they've decided to take it upon themselves. And what's in that corridor is a mix of primarily sweet pepper bush and willow on the edge of the pond. Both of these species respond really well to lateral pruning without harming the integrity of the plant. And then what they have, the trees that are growing in there are tupelo, and they didn't ask for this, but I suggest if you grant the permit that if they so choose that off a couple of trees, they prune a little bit of sucker growth off the lower parts of the tupelos, just to, again, get them that peek through. I'm sorry, I thought I silenced that. Peek through, but that's not what they're asking to do. They're asking to prune the sweet pepper and the willow using proper pruning techniques, which I would ensure that their landscaper or whoever was going to do it would understand what lateral pruning means. They probably do, but we like to check. And it would extend from the edge of the pond inland. It's probably about 15 feet thick from pond to edge of lawn. It's not an extremely thick area.
If I can add to that, thanks. In May of 2020, we came during, COVID, and we came up early for the summer, and it had been cut. I don't know by who, certainly not by ours. Down almost to the and straight across, like someone just took a hedge and went zoom.
We had a conversation with that
which
individual.
kind of hurt my soul, just because nothing was cut at the elbow or carefully. I don't know who did that, and we haven't been able to determine that, but that is not in any regard how we would ever approach something like that. Just, but yeah.
So I'm recommending approval with a -2 determination. That's actually -2 and 3 because technically the willow is in the water, and that's in the wetland, and the 2 is for work in the buffer zone. So approval with a -2 and 3 with the condition that whoever is to do the work meets with myself on the site ahead of time, and also that a condition we put on really everybody that comes in front of us is that no fertilizers, even organic, and chemicals such as herbicides be used within 100 feet of the wetland resource area, because even organic chemicals have the nitrogen and phosphorus that deteriorate our water quality.
Yep.
So, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Ask commissioners for questions, comments, Wayne?
None.
Alan, anything? Jim?
Pretty simple.
No questions.
See, we're a lot easier than you thought. We're a lot easier.
You
guys are
gave a
very-
good presentation.
John?
Not for me, thank you.
Same, thanks.
Thank you.
And I have no questions either. If it was trimmed in May, that low, it came back pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, it sure did. I mean, I don't know when it was trimmed, to be honest. We just got there in May, and, I mean, it seemed, I don't even know if it was really fresh, but it wouldn't have
fresh
probably
then.
grown since then. But yeah,
Yeah.
thankfully it did. I was worried about
Yeah.
the sanctity of it, to be honest, because it was really just a straight line across. But it has come back well, thankfully, and we're glad for it.
Yeah, terrific, good. So with that, can we have a motion on this request?
Sure, I will move that we approve the request for a determination of applicability for 15 Lake Drive, map 25, parcel W1-8B, with a -2 and -3 determination.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
I'm grateful to you all, and we look forward to working, not just in this case, but in all cases with the Conservation
Great.
Commission. And for what it's worth, to follow up what you said, Melissa and Amy have been incredible in terms of guiding us through the process, which we
Terrific.
appreciate.
Great.
Thank you all.
So we will get this out to you within a couple days, and we'll see if you either want us to mail it to you or to pick it up, the permit, okay?
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good night.
Okay, next item on the agenda is another request for a for a determination of applicability for 33 Uncle Vinny's Drive, map 17 parcel F1-1 for a proposed second floor addition. Do we have a proponent here tonight?
Chris Childs here from Patriot Builders.
Can you turn up your volume? It's very hard to hear.
We'll try to turn it up on our end too.
Not sure I know how to turn the volume of the mic up.
No, it doesn't get us there.
One of the numbers on your laptop, one of the top number symbols should also have like a little speaker.
Yeah, I've got 3 monitors going here, and one of them has a speaker, and I've got it up pretty high.
Yeah, you're still very, very difficult to hear.
Maybe try, Chris, muting yourself on there and calling on your cell phone.
Okay?
Give him a minute. Oh, you'll have to mute your
How's that?
computer though.
Much better.
Yeah,
Great,
Gotcha, good.
you got me now?
got
Okay.
it.
Chris Childs from Patriot Builders. We are proposing to raise a roof on the north side of 33 Uncle Vinny's. And there is a marsh about approximately 46 feet away from the building. The top of the coastal bank is actually 46 feet away. So we are seeking a negative determination, and we are not proposing any excavation, simply just removing the roof and adding some second floor space within 46 feet of that marsh.
Good, thank you. Amy, do you have comments or questions?
Question first, Chris, can your existing septic system handle the additional bedrooms that you're proposing?
So we are eliminating a bedroom on the first floor and adding it and moving it to the second floor.
Okay.
So if you look at that site plan I submitted, it shows shows 4 bedrooms actually. The bedroom on the bottom left corner of that highlighted area is becoming a stairway and a laundry to get to the second floor.
Okay. Thank you. Maybe you can
You're welcome.
turn us down a little bit. Thank you. I'm getting a little echo. So as Chris said, there's gonna be no footprint change, no change to the foundation, simply a second floor on top of the portion of the home. Because this is 46 feet away from the wetland, it falls within our 50-foot no disturb zone. So I thought it was appropriate to come in front of you as an RDA instead of just handling this administratively. So again, no footprint change, no ground change. I did go back, Chris, and I don't know if the owners are on the line as well, but when we visited the site today, this has nothing to do with your application, but back in 2015, when the Butlers had applied to do landscaping activities on their property, the Conservation Commission put the condition of no fertilizers or chemical application. And it was very apparent during the on-site that that was happening. There's not a single weed in the lawn area, which leads me to think that there is an herbicide being applied, as well as the lawn being very lush, especially in times of drought. So it will be up to the commission to decide how to deal with that. It is an actual condition in that order, and we do enforce that when things come to that. So, I mean, my recommendation for that, in that respect, is for the commission to issue a warning, have me check on it in a few months. If it continues, then fines would be levied. For your project, and I know it's not you who's doing that, but it's just something to convey to your clients, which we will put in writing in a letter if the commission agrees with me. But roof runoff, what are you gonna do with the roof runoff from the new roof?
So we were gonna just add gutters and run them into the existing locations that they are now. To be honest with you, I don't know if they go into dry wells or not. Let me see if I can get a photo.
I would just recommend that they either go into dry wells, or if your groundwater is pretty high there, that you could do French drains. So you don't get runoff.
Okay.
That's all I have. With those conditions, I'd recommend approval.
Okay, good. Questions, Wayne?
No, I'm all set with it, it's pretty simple.
Alan? Good.
No questions?
John?
I pretty much agree with what Amy suggested, with one exception, which is that I'm not sure in 2 months you'll really be able to tell whether they've stopped applying stuff. So I would suggest a check in 2 months and then May or something of next year.
Okay.
Other than that, I have nothing else.
Mark?
No questions, very straightforward.
Yeah, I guess I got a little discussion, some items to discuss on this one. So it is in 0 to 50 where we're seeing changes. And they're adding 2 bedrooms. So we're gonna see more use of the septic system. So I'm not sure that's our purview or not. But I guess I don't agree with the idea of having it as an RDA for any changes in the 0 to 50. I think that it should be a notice of intent. It's a big change to the structure, and it's still in the 0 to 50. So I guess it's a concern I have. I certainly don't think this would ever be handled administratively. It's a large increase to not so much the footprint, but the structure in the 0 to 50. So it's not like we have to automatically approve this type of a request. It's something we should consider. And I think we're really kind of moving pretty quickly on this, and maybe we should. But you've got a salt marsh 46 feet away. This part of town is not slated to be sewered. And so you're gonna have that extra load on the septic. Is this property is it gonna become a rental? with more use. So I'm not exactly as keen on this as I think maybe some others are. But I also don't know, with our regulation bylaws, if we would have any grounds to not support it. I just wanted to put those ideas on the table. The non-compliance or the fertilizing use is a separate issue, but to my eye, it's been continuous. They've been, keeping that lawn really green since the last project was done. So I do think we should absolutely issue an order, a letter, and issue a warning, and then have a fine that follows after that. So I'm not sure if any folks have comments on my thoughts here. I just hope everyone's realizing it's activity to 0 to 50, which is our no disturb zone. So we don't have to approve changes in 0 to 50 unless we declare a hardship or a variance. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Just a point of clarification. Brad, you had mentioned that they're adding 2 bedrooms, yet what I heard from his presentation was that they were eliminating 1 bedroom and putting 1 bedroom on the top, so the total number of bedrooms would stay exactly the same.
No, I think what he said was there's 4 on the plan, 4 bedrooms, but they're eliminating 1 below. So by the plan, they'd be adding 3, but he's saying that 1 is not gonna be a bedroom, so they're adding 2, I think.
Well, let's ask the applicant.
Yeah.
We are removing a bedroom for the first floor and putting it on the second floor, so we're not changing the bedroom count. There'll be 1 bedroom on the second floor, and there'll be 3 on the first floor, which are existing. There's currently 4. We're
Okay.
gonna take 1 away, and we're gonna put it on the second floor.
Yeah, I think the site plan is a little confusing because it shows your first floor layout as the 4, but I couldn't really tell that you're eliminating 1 and then putting 1 up top, so.
Yes, I apologize for that. Yeah, I should have submitted floor plans to show that, but so that, again, that bedroom that is kind of in the southwest corner of that area is going away. It's becoming a stairway to get to the second floor. There'll also be a laundry in that location. And then the bedroom that's currently on the first floor will now be on the second floor.
We can condition that the number of bedrooms remains the same.
So, Chris, what's the total number of bedrooms that'll be in the house after the addition's added?
I believe it'll be 4. I mean, there is some space above that garage, but that's like a rec room or something like that. So it's a 4-bedroom house.
So presently, it's only a 2-bedroom house?
No, it's a 4-bedroom house. Currently a 4-bedroom house.
But you're adding 2 to the top floor.
We are not adding 2 to the top floor.
They have
We are
4 on the bottom.
Simply moving 1 bedroom to the top floor.
Oh,
So therefore, the total number of bedrooms will stay exactly the same.
Yes.
That is correct. As a matter of fact, I stand corrected on so the existing number of bedrooms, I'm looking at the site plan, is 5. I believe there is a space above the garage that would be considered a bedroom. So this is a 5-bedroom home. It will remain a 5-bedroom home.
I can check that with the health department's records.
If I can follow up then, so the
Yeah.
plan we have is confusing. What will be on the second floor? What type of rooms?
4 bedrooms, 2 baths, from what I see.
That's what it says, but that's
No, that's the
not-
first floor.
So do we even have a plan for the second floor?
So the second floor will have you go up the stairs and you're in an open area, kind of a sitting area, and then there'll be a bedroom and a bathroom. I could submit floor plans.
yeah, had this been a notice of intent, I assume we would have had all that information
Yeah, it's,
with this application.
it's a minor disagreement, Amy. I can see exactly why you did this, but for me, it's still an alteration of 0 to 50. And so I prefer seeing a notice of intent for this type of change.
Had they been changing anything to the foundation or changing anything to the footprint, I would have automatically gone to that, because they're literally going up, and they're not going on top of like a patio or a deck, they're going on top of an existing single-family home. That's why I suggested the RDA for it. So in terms of additional impacts to the resource, especially if the number of bedrooms and the flow is staying the same, I didn't see additional impacts to what exists. But that was my read of things.
I get that.
But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. I just want to have some discussion, because I think there's been some other projects, a couple in South Harwich, where the public response has not been good. They feel that, we allowed an expansion of footprint from 0 to 50. And in some cases we did, in some cases it was more 50 to 100. But I do think it's something we should evaluate. It's still a change, increase in human activity in the 0 to 50. But it's different from what I thought, because obviously it's not, as shown here, there's not an increase in 3 bedrooms in the second floor, so.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful just for one copy of the architecturals, Chris, if you could give them to us too. That way we can also compare it when we see the building permit application.
Sure.
All right, thanks.
That's all right. Stan, did you have any questions? No. I had a couple of questions, and I agreed with all the comments that have been made with respect to the lawn that's on this property. With one addition, when we went onto the property, I noticed that there was a sprinkler head that was already popped up that didn't go back down. Last night it appeared. So it looks to me like they are irrigating the lawn as well. And obviously, as of the 1st of the month, irrigation is no longer permitted in town. So would you please convey to the property owners that if they do have their irrigation running, that it has to be turned off? That being said, when we originally permitted this lot, the improvements on this lot, Amy, was there any discussion about irrigation systems?
Let me check, I have the order here. It was the same owner. It says no herbicides. The existing irrigation shall not be expanded, and no fertilizers or herbicides shall occur within Conservation Commission jurisdiction, which is not just a 100-foot buffer, but is actually, I think, all of the lot, because I believe all of the lot is flood zone. And that condition was to remain in perpetuity. So there was the condition was that it was to not be expanded upon. What I saw there today, and I'm happy to go back and look, is that was what was there in 2015. That the way the lawn area was, that was all the same.
Okay.
But I can verify
Even
that.
back into where the fire pit was. That was
Yep.
what we permitted the last time, was the fire pit
The
area.
landscape activities, yeah.
Yeah, and that was all pre-existing then.
So that was approved.
And there was one area back there that I assume would have been sprinkled at the time.
There, where that patio was all lawn.
All right.
So there was like an extensive planting plan.
Yeah, I'm really struggling with the appearance of the lawn there. The fact that we had previously put them on notice that no fertilizer was to be permitted on the lot. And it's evident that there's quite a bit that's being applied there, along with herbicides. So your proposal is that we just issue a letter of warning?
It's up to the commission. I mean, I think we have the basis to issue a fine if you saw fit immediately, but
Yeah.
it's up to you.
I mean, my personal preference in situations like this is, it's like shoveling sand. We just don't seem to make any headway on this issue persistently. No matter how many times we put these conditions on, they seem to be ignored fairly willfully. And at some point, we've just got to stop. So I'm personally in favor of a one-time fine in this particular case, just to show that we are serious about this. And, these properties need to be monitored closer than they are right now. So that's my suggestion on this particular application. So it sounds to me like we have a couple of issues. One, we would want to see a better floor plan of the site improvements, is that what I'm hearing?
A change from what's shown here.
Yeah, all right. I'm in favor of imposing a $300 fine for the application of fertilizer and pesticides on the lot. I noticed there's a raised garden bed back there as well that
Oh, right.
was not
Forgot.
permitted, that we don't have
Let me
any
just double
evidence
check
that
that.
was ever permitted. And that's, I assume, in the 0 to 50 as well?
Yes, but let me just double check that that was not on this plan. That is not on the approved plan.
So that would also have to be removed, I assume, or they would have to encompass or include that in there.
Yeah, I mean, I would think because it's structural, that that would be something the commission would not have allowed in that location. They would have allowed it outside the 50.
Yeah. So, number of issues. Discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. How can we vote on what you just said without having factual proof that they put pesticide and fertilizer on their lawn? Who's to say that isn't organic or some other chemical or other things that are biodegradable and that would work? I mean, without knowing the chemical makeup, I don't think we can just say, you're gonna get fined because you put this on. We don't really have the proof.
Yeah,
Fair point.
I agree completely with Alan on that.
Okay.
That
We
I think
can
would
say, we
need
can
to have-
ask,
We would need to have factual proof that they were actually treating the lawn with fertilizer or pesticides in order to impose a fine. Now, I have no problem with Amy's suggestion of just sending out a letter of warning, without a fine attached to it, and see where that goes.
we can ask them to provide us with what their lawn care practices are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
all
would
right.
be fine.
That's a fair point.
That's consistent with what we've been doing, is sending the letter. And the exceptions are when we've seen repeated pellet use. We're not allowing organic, so it really doesn't matter what they put.
Well, I'm just saying the proof.
But I think we have issued fines where we've seen repeated hyper-green lawns with pellets applied. And at that site, I've just seen it green for several years, but I kind of agree. Let's keep with our process.
Okay.
Issue the letter.
But I would like to ask what they're, not just issue the warning, but have them show what they're doing.
Yep.
All right. So we have a couple of open issues then?
But the raised bed, that should be removed. And I can write a letter to that effect with a deadline to do it, to move it. And if it's outside the 60, then it would be something, it was very small.
Right.
It would be something I would have approved administratively, just not where it was.
So where this is an RDA, are you comfortable with or approving it pending submission of a revised site building?
Yes, because again, the footprint is not changing. It's house underneath, it's gonna be house above. But we can put the conditions that the number of bedrooms is to stay the same. I will check what their septic permit allows them to have. So I think having a plan for the record showing the architecturals inside would be helpful, but I don't think it's really, other than, of course, bathrooms and flow, it's not so much the purview of the commission to show like what their rooms are inside.
All right, okay, good.
But it's good to have something to compare it to when we get an application in for health or building.
So let me try to make a motion on this then. I would recommend we approve this application for a proposed second floor addition with a -2 and 3 determination, with a couple of conditions. One, that a revised floor plan be submitted, clarification on roof runoff, whether it be into dry wells or French drains or some other manner. Issuance of a letter of warning with respect to the potential application of fertilizer and herbicides on the lawns, and removal of the raised garden bed or filing of a request, or it would be an RDA.
If they were to get it out of the 60, I would do it administratively, it's tiny.
All right, so that the raised garden bed be resolved to Amy's satisfaction.
Okay, I'll second
Comment.
that motion.
Any comment, discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? One opposed. All right, good, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. Next
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for 14 Mill Point Road, map 1, parcel J1-94, proposed pier ramp float dredging. Amy?
They want to run a new mitigation plan by me, so they've asked for continuance to August 17th. I'm meeting them this week, tomorrow, I think.
All right, so can we maybe have a motion then to extend the hearing for notice of intent for 14 Mill Point?
Sure. I'll move that we continue the hearing on the notice of intent request for 14 Mill Point Road, map 1, parcel J1-94, to our meeting of August 17th, 2022.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, notice of intent for the Harwich Conservation Trust Coldbrook Preserve, map 23, parcels C3-2, C1-0, and C1-1 for ecological restoration. Good evening.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm gonna recuse myself from this discussion.
I am also.
All right, okay, fine, thank you.
We'll come and get you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
We're good. All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Conservation Commission, Town Conservation Administrator Michael Locke, Executive Director of the Harwich Conservation Trust. Just to recap the purpose of this Coldbrook Ecological Restoration Project, Harwich Conservation Trust, in partnership with the town, have three major goals. One, to enhance the wildlife habitat health. Two, to enhance water quality. Three, to enhance the visitor experience. And the town's primary interest is to enhance water quality by virtue of naturally reducing nitrogen as it flows in groundwater, surface water through the Coldbrook system on its way to Saquotucket Harbor on Nantucket Sound, which, as described in the town's comprehensive wastewater management plan, would result in less need for sewer infrastructure, thereby saving taxpayer dollars long term. So since we met with the Conservation Commission on June 15th, I also want to recap a few other meetings that took place between then and now, including a June 24th remote meeting to discuss proposed channel restoration and fish passage. June 28th, Conservation Commission meeting, site visit at the Coldbrook Preserve to also discuss different aspects of the project, including proposed channel restoration and fish passage. And then also on July 25th, a remote meeting of the project partners, as well as Brad Chase, representing Division of Marine Fisheries, and also obviously a member of the Conservation Commission, to discuss again proposed channel restoration and fish passage. The eco-restoration design has been modified to accommodate the comments on proposed stream restoration design and fish passage. And at a request of the Conservation Department staff, we also provided aerial video of the site. That was courtesy of Harwich Conservation Trust volunteer Steve Furlong, who I think was on earlier. I also wanted to mention remotely attending is Eric Ford with the State's Division of Ecological Restoration, an ecological restoration specialist helping us with this project, and Ed Eichner, principal of TMDL Solutions, who is a consultant to the town. And present in person with us is Harwich Conservation Trust Board of Trustees President Tom Evans, Trustee Colin Leonard, who's also chair of the HCT Land Stewardship Committee, and Nick Nelson, our lead in the design process, who's a regional director with Interfluve and a fluvio geomorphologist. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Nick to continue the review of this project and answer any of your questions. And at any time, if you wanted to show that video, see that video, then feel free.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. My name is Nick Nelson with Interfluve, as Mike said. Happy to go over any of the adjustments in the drawings. Since our last meeting, some of the primary concerns were dealing with blockages within the stream channel that might occur following restoration. And so we adjusted the areas in and out of the ponded locations to try to minimize the amount of vegetation growth that might colonize the stream channel and block that up a little bit. So whereas in the prior designs we had deep marsh surrounding the ponds and the stream channels going into that deep marsh, now we have the stream channel and shallow marsh going all the way straight into the ponds. So we have more of that direct connected flow into the ponds and then out of the ponds as well to help with that fish passage. We also reduced the number of largewood root wads in the stream channel. So the volume, the count of root wads has been reduced in each of those bog cells, and we also removed the typical detail that showed large wood crossing over the channel. So the large wood root wads will only be on the edge of the channel, providing habitat opportunities and cover for fish, and also providing some scour opportunities, which is important for fish as well. But they'll be tucked up next to the bank rather than spanning across the channel. And those are the primary adjustments made in the restoration design drawings that we had talked to Brad about in those follow-up meetings as well. And I'm happy to discuss any questions or comments you might have on those.
Thank you. Amy, do you have comments?
Do you want questions or comments just related to that or to the project as a whole?
Up to you, how you want to.
So just to bring the commission back to the last meeting, we were kind of waiting for a few things. One was more detail on the boardwalks and the public passages over the creek. And as you can see in their site plan and their permit set that we, on the second page, it's site plan L1. See, there's 4 locations for the stream crossings with raised structures. To get to, and the ADA paths, which are more focused around the Bank Street area, can you remind us what the material of that path is going to be?
Yeah, so the ADA trail will be sort of a crushed stone material.
Okay.
Real fine crushed stone for wheelchair accessible.
Would it be possible, to not do something like stone dust, which compacts to the point where it becomes completely impervious? I know you have to have a certain amount of stability for ADA access, but if we could not use hardening or stone dust, which becomes impenetrable, that would be a positive.
You have a particular product that you prefer to see, or a mixture, or just, I'll talk to the designers on that.
Talk to the designers. If they want to run something by me, I'm happy to.
Great.
But our typical language for stuff like that, especially because it's in the buffer to a wetland, is not to allow something that becomes impervious.
Yep.
So I see that your boardwalks themselves are going to be elevated with stone head walls and helical piles, and your spans are large. So I'm happy to see that. If they're 20-foot spans, which is a large span for those. So that's good. There's not too many actual pilings going in. I don't really have other questions other than, would you be able to tell the commission, because the other thing we were waiting for was the natural heritage correspondence, which you did provide and they all have, but can you kind of sum up where we're at with that?
Yep, absolutely. So two elements of the coordination with natural heritage was involving the water willow, which is a plant that supports a listed moth. And there were these plants identified in cell 1, so at the upstream end of the project. And they're principally found in the ditches of that bog. So we've been communicating with Misty Ann at Natural Heritage, and we committed to not doing any work within those ditches where that water willow is found. So Harwich Conservation Trust worked with a biologist to map out the water willow, and that was part of the documentation that I provided. It shows that map. As we get through this process and get into through the rest of the permitting and final designs in the fall, we will put a no disturb zone around those ditches of cell 1 there to protect those plants. The other element were the box turtles. There's a number of box turtles that are being tracked on the property right now. They have radio collars, and they're being radio tags anyway. They're being tracked, and so we can see their movements, which is amazing to be able to observe. So we're currently working with Natural Heritage and the biologist that has been monitoring those turtles to develop a protection plan during construction. So that's going to be ongoing through this summer and fall, also working directly with Natural Heritage to develop that plan. Her primary, she did comment on, it's wonderful to see them tracked because now during construction we can know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're coming close to an active construction zone, we can physically move them out of the way. Fortunately, on this site, we have a lot of opportunity to move those turtles to protected space outside of the work zone. There are the wetlands to the north of the property and to the east of Bank Street that is a forested wetland as well, and those box turtles can be moved to that area pretty readily and easily. So because this type of a project lasts for multiple months on end, it may span nesting time periods, it may span winter foraging time periods, it may span different portions of their life history, and so that will be part of that protection plan, is during these different seasons what our actions will be during construction. I suspect the primary things will be to be identifying some of the potential nesting habitat, protecting those during construction that's out of the nesting season, and then during the nesting season, making sure that we're protecting those turtles. So that's going to be part of the process with Natural Heritage that we plan to work through this summer and fall.
So my recommendations, we didn't have a formal no-take letter from Natural Heritage, and we're used to seeing those letters, or a similar project with box turtles was the Chloe's Path project. The condition we put on that one could be similar to what we could put on this, is that a turtle protection plan has to be physically actually approved by Natural Heritage prior to a machine touching that ground out there, and has to be submitted to us, as well as we have confirmation that it's acceptable from Natural Heritage. So it's a little bit different, but it can be done this way, that we condition that they have to comply with all of the conditions that Natural Heritage puts on this project, and being specific about the turtle protection plan. And I will say the town has land adjacent to this property on the north side too, which has some pocket wetlands and some upland area. So if we get to the point where we approve this project and you're in need of place, maybe the commission could also consider our property as being a place for relocation.
Absolutely. I think they're using that location now also. We see them, according to the maps,
they are.
going back and forth
Yep.
through that whole
They like
area.
it.
So,
I don't have any more questions. I'm prepared to recommend approval of the project to you. Thought a lot about this project over the many years that this has kind of been conceptualized, and it will be a big disruption at first. I don't think anybody's saying that it won't be. But you have the chance to undo past practice, to remove restrictions, to improve habitat, and gain a huge amount of wetland, which wetland is important for so many, you know, habitat, nitrogen attenuation, so many other things. You have the ability to recreate that. There's not often times where you get to increase wetlands in what we do. I know the commission, and I'll leave it up to the commissioners to ask, but I know there were questions about the whole nitrogen attenuation piece and how do we know that X% of nitrogen is going to be removed. But if you want to ask those questions, I will let you ask them, because those are what you brought to my attention. So.
Good. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Okay, good, thank you. Jim, do you have questions?
No,
or
I don't
comments?
have any questions.
John? Mark?
I do. I'd love to know everything you know about nitrogen attenuation. Start at the very
5
beginning.
minutes.
I'm going to defer nitrogen questions to Ed Eichner, who's on the screen here. But that's a big volume of questions. So if there's a way that you can kind of narrow it down, we can focus it in on this site in particular, if that's helpful.
Well, I can simplify it maybe.
Sure.
Earlier on, there was a projection of this having some benefit to the sewering of 200 homes.
Mm-hmm.
How does that relate to this particular piece of property, and which 200 homes? Where is the benefit on the other end? If the town's gonna pour $2 million into that, or $2 million into this, the money's still going out the door. My concern is you have to do both. So I'd like to see some evidence or some indication that this can in fact work to some mechanical degree, at least some reasonable assurance. What I'm hearing, and repeatedly what I'm hearing, is the indication that it probably will help. But I'm not really comfortable with that.
Sure.
I'd like to know more.
Appreciate that. Ed, do you want to speak to the nitrogen element of this?
Sure. Thank you, Nick. Can everybody hear me?
If you could turn it up just a little bit, that would be helpful.
I'll turn it up. There we go. Is that any better?
Yeah, that's
A little bit, yeah.
better.
All right. So we have gone through, during the course of the many years that we've worked on this, we go back to starting with the Massachusetts Estuaries Project, had a monitoring station at the bottom of the Colebrook system. So we actually were able to track the nitrogen attenuation there at that point. And that was about, I think it was about 30% or so. And what we have got as we've gone along, the town has accomplished a number of sort of baseline evaluations to look at the system as it has changed, and allowed us to get a better sense of where the bulk of the nitrogen is coming into the system. And it's coming into the system along the eastern edge, up along the part where the pine trees are very well established. There was a section of bog that wasn't really used that much. And so as we have gone along in all of our discussions with all of the partners, including the Department of Environmental Restoration and Nick's folks and all the partners, we have looked at different strategies to increase the amount of nitrogen attenuation. And what we have now is a diversity of habitats that are in a lot of ways geared towards increasing the nitrogen attenuation in this system. We've got a series of ponds that are structured to first gather most of the groundwater that's coming into the system along that eastern edge, most of the nitrogen with it. So they'll have the first shot at it, and then it'll go down to the southern portion of the system, cell 8, where over time we'll start to develop more of a salt marsh, and that will increase and enhance additional nitrogen attenuation in that area as well. So what we have is a system that's already attenuated nitrogen, and we're trying to get to more nitrogen attenuation by increasing the kinds of habitats that actually remove nitrogen.
Ed,
Is that a good start for you?
yeah, can I ask a follow-up question, Ed?
Sure.
In your experience with working with, a lot of these systems on Cape Cod, would you ever give a specific down to the single-digit number of percent attenuation of a natural system like this in the year after construction, or the second year, or the 5th year, or the 10th year after? Or is it more of a range? Or
Well, as you know, Nick, we have a natural system, and we have gone through 2 different sets of baseline analysis, and there were differences between those. And there are all sorts of factors that influence natural systems, including, how much groundwater is being discharged. If we're going through the period like we're going through right now, where we don't have very much precipitation, groundwater levels drop and stream flow is going to drop, and the amount of nitrogen going into the system is probably going to drop as well. It's something that we saw when we looked through and did those baseline analysis. So there's going to be variability associated with this. What we're gearing up, though, is by adding these habitats that are known to remove nitrogen, we will get to a spot where we're getting more removed than what we have right now.
So thank you, Ed. So Mark, to follow up and to add to that, we are dealing with nature and natural ecosystems, and this attenuation element varies by year. It varies by year right now, and it'll vary by year afterwards. I think the goal here, as Ed said, is to enhance the nitrogen attenuation. Generally across the town and across the region, there's the opportunities for these projects to work hand in hand with sewering to remove nitrogen from our groundwater and our ecosystems. So it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to cure everything, but the idea is that it is improving the situation on this particular site.
My expectation is not a silver bullet. I was hoping to gain a little bit better understanding, which I do have a little better understanding now. My first impression was that a lot of this was more based on increased water flow than the habitat surrounding. So what I just took out of this is that the newly created habitat is going to be the primary tool to conduct the attenuation. Is that correct?
Right, and it's the combination of a number of different elements. It's the deeper water that's out there, it's the stream channel itself, it's the deep marsh and shallow marsh, it's the salt marsh in the cell 8 component as well. So it's all of that pulled together. Yep.
I'd really like to have a better understanding of how far reaching that is back into the areas of homes. If this is primarily going to be induced from the eastern side of that area, that's a whole different dynamic than the northern part of it.
Right.
I'd just like a little clarification on that.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, so the attenuation that the site will be doing is just on the water that's coming into the Cold Brook Preserve. That nitrogen attenuation doesn't expand outside of the project boundaries. and Ed, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's really, the nitrogen is in that groundwater, and that groundwater is flowing from the north down into the project site generally. And so through these restoration actions, the site will begin to treat that groundwater essentially before it gets to Saquatucket Harbor. So it won't be treating the water outside the boundaries of the project site, just within.
I understand. I guess I'm trying to get
If I
better-
could clarify
Yeah.
a little bit there.
Please.
What we're talking about, the watershed to this system extends quite a ways into Harwich, almost up to Long Pond. So you would have the opportunity that you would have treatment within that whole watershed, because that's where all of the nitrogen is coming from. So you're going to get, the idea is you're going to get treatment within this Colebrook system, and that's going to save Saquatucket Harbor, just like Nick mentioned. But it's also has the potential to treat a large portion of the watershed, depending on how much attenuation occurs.
That's helpful. I know there's no hard and fast answer, but the answer I hear is more is better, and I'm not necessarily a believer in that theory. I guess you've answered the question as best you can. So in short, you got 50 acres of property that in all actuality are going to be decimated.
There'll be severe impact during construction, yep.
Yeah, well, same thing. Call it a different word if you want, but
It's not all 50 acres, but it's a large portion of it, yep.
it's a big piece of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Of all the other species that are there and thriving now, what's the method of protection for all of that? I mean, I just heard the explanation about the box turtle, but there's a whole lot of other things that are living.
Yeah.
Where do they go?
Yep, and this is not an uncommon question that comes up in these meetings, so thank you for bringing that up. Again, speaking from experience with these other projects on the Cape and in Plymouth County, there are a lot of other individual species and individuals in these ecosystems. There will certainly be loss. We can't save all the frogs and every turtle that's in the ditches. But I have seen contractors, and I have done it myself, when there are organisms that we see in the way of the excavator, if they're doing work. There are some giant snapping turtles out in these ecosystems, and other painted turtles and others. They'll pick those turtles up, either in the bucket to move them out of the way, or by hand to move them to another location. So the organisms that we can see that cannot move out of the way as easily as others, we protect in place, and we protect at the time. Birds, there's lots of other habitat for birds nearby for them to use. Fish, in terms of the aquatic organisms in the water, all of the active flow during construction will be out of the active construction zone, so fish will still be able to move back and forth through this system. Certainly the plant life, a lot of that will go away during construction, but I think as I presented in the first meeting and showing some post-restoration pictures of other projects, that seed is still there in the ground, and that pops up very fast afterwards. So vegetationally, these ecosystems recover rapidly, and when we go out to these sites afterwards, it's a cacophony of insect noise and grasshoppers, and there's dragonflies all over the place, and frogs and turtles are back. So we see that rebound, but I'm not gonna say that there will be no individuals lost during the process.
I have a question,
Sure.
if it's okay.
Sure.
What type of monitoring would you be proposing to study the effectiveness of the nitrogen attenuation as we go forward here? Because I'm assuming that in order to say we've met these thresholds to not have to sewer X many homes, we have to have some data to back that up.
Yes, I believe the town is funding that monitoring that Ed and Brian will be doing. Ed, do you want to speak to that? A summary of what the monitoring will be?
Sure. So the plan is to do monitoring in a lot of what, first of all, you're right in terms of permitting through Mass DEP. In order to get the nitrogen credits that you want to have for this system, you're going to have to document that you are actually getting the nitrogen removal that you are targeting. So we're going to be, the current plan is to do monitoring similar to what has been done in the baseline analysis, which is, it's more intensive during the summer, less intensive during the winter, but it is year round to get an idea of what the nitrogen concentrations and how they change with the seasons and throughout the year. In large part, you really want to focus on nitrogen that's coming out of the system during the summer, because that's when Sequatucket Harbor is going to be the most sensitive to things. So there's a monitoring program that's been proposed that has gone to the town, and we've been working with Dan Pelletier to try to get that all squared away.
I'll get a copy of that from him and share it with the commission.
Well, let me know if there's any issues with getting a hold of that.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, so the focus that I've heard is strictly on nitrogen. Are there any other elements or effluents that, any chemicals in the effluent that we would also want to monitor for or create baselines on?
The monitoring program actually tracks a whole bunch of things, including salinity and phosphorus concentrations, and I can't give you the complete list off the top of my head, but there's a lot of different parameters. We're trying to get a handle to look at all of the various portions of the nitrogen. We want to look at all the different. We want to look at the fully oxidized, the nitrates. We want to look at the ammonias. Look at the particulate portions, so that we get an idea as the system goes through and changes. Different portions of the nitrogen are going to rise and fall, so we're trying to get a sense of how that's going to change as well. I mean, we have a baseline, so we have an idea where in the system all of these changes occur and what they change to, and then we're going to, as the system goes through its restoration phase, the construction phase, then we'll go through monitoring after that. As the system starts to re-equilibrate, we're also going to keep monitoring at that point too. So this system will change. It'll take a while. You've seen like the changes that have occurred with the plants as the system has moved further and further away from being a cranberry bog. The system is going to change again once this restoration construction goes on, and then it's going to move into a new equilibrium as it goes along.
Okay, thank you. Mark, follow-up? Any other questions?
This is just terribly simple, but through the devastation of that whole project, to bring it all to fruition, when I look at the potential loss of existing habitat, the impact of every creature, and I look at what's to be gained on the other end, what's not clear to me is how much better is it going to be? Is there a way to describe that? And I'm not necessarily asking that 100% for myself. I've had an opportunity to ask a considerable amount of people if they were aware of this project throughout the town. And I was really shocked to find out that so few people were aware. To me, that's concerning. And I have to believe that there's going to be some excitement to come as this reaches a closer destination. And I'd like to see that mitigated right from the beginning.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily opposed to the project, but I don't have a totally clear understanding of it. I understand the goal, but when I look at risk versus reward, I'm not convinced we're there.
I can speak a bit to the recovery process. I think something that we try to do with these projects is we're not trying to get it back to what it was 400 years ago. What one of the attempts is to jumpstart the ecological recovery. So right now in that 50 some odd acres that you described before, there are some areas that are really nice wetland. And there are some of those spots that we're having no disturb zones in. We're trying to protect some of those. Others that will be going right through it. But there's a good chunk of that 50 acres that was, as far as we can determine from historical documents and maps and that sort of thing, was likely robust wetland and is now it already is upland or is on that trajectory. So, leaving it as it is, it's a wonderfully vegetated site. There are lots of amazing organisms that are there right now. It's sort of a patchwork of wetland and upland throughout that area. And in a state where we've lost a lot of our percentage of wetlands and worldwide as well, as Amy mentioned earlier, this opportunity to gain some of that wetland back is really special for the town here. And there's been some, again, the monitoring for these types of restoration projects is very young. There's been some that have been done for a few years, and they've looked at cranberry bogs that have been retired but with no restoration happening on it, and others that have had the restoration. And I don't have the report in front of me, so I'm not going to speak to specifics, but they've just seen that jump start happen. And so the recovery on a number of different wetland fronts and water quality elements are able to get us decades ahead of where we would be if we just let it go on its own. So yes, it'll be some devastation initially. We know that the vegetation grows back quickly there, so that's going to grow back right away. But the anticipation here is that we're jump-starting this process. We're kicking it forwards decades ahead of what we otherwise could have.
Could you speculate how many decades?
I'd have to look back at that report to remind myself. But I think it was saying in the sort of 70 year range, in that range. I can try to track that down for you.
That's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could provide, just for our edification, and we can provide it to others if it's not too scientific.
It's pretty scientific, but
Well,
I'll try to track it down.
if we could have a copy, that would be great.
Yeah.
That's all I got for the moment.
Okay, all right, good, very good. Good questions, Mike, thank you. Brett?
Yeah, I'll speak to some of the fish passage modifications, but first I want to try to ask some questions that might help Mark as well and make some comments too. Like, I think this project, in terms of habitat improvements, will be really significant. I think in a 5-year window, you're going to see them, and in 10 years, it's going to be spectacular. So I think the habitat improvements are really going to be meaningful and be impressive to a lot of people. So I feel great about that. If I were you, I'd have more concerns about, will the attenuation goals be realized. And the other thing that isn't our business, particularly on this board, but is this the best public policy for using public funds? You know, you grew up here, you've seen plenty of bogs that just returned on their own. And ones that were retired in the 50s and 60s, you'd hardly know it was a bog. You know, they've just come back to either upland or wetland, whatever they lead to be. So, but I think that the habitat goals are really impressive to me, and I think it's going to look fantastic down the road. So, your attenuation questions I think are important. What I'm hearing is that right now, naturally, we're getting maybe 30% attenuation of existing nitrogen in the system. And the goals I've heard for this system and other places are you'd love to bump that to say 40 to 60%. Is that reasonable, Ed, to characterize things that way? To gain that attenuation up to 40 to 60%?
That's right, Brad. That's what we're sort of shooting for. A lot of the freshwater pond systems that we've looked at have been up in the, the 60, 70, 80% range. We're hoping that the diversity of habitats that we're going to have here, the mix of the marshes and the ponds and the salt marsh, will get us hopefully up to 50%. I'm hoping for more, but we'll see. And it may take some time to get there. As you've been talking about, as the system changes and recovers and sort of settles into a different sort of steady state, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and I think that's significant in terms of the TMDL. That's a big reduction. So I think it's important. Will it be realized? I can't say it. I have no idea. And also, back to public policy, I'd like to see as much of the town sewer as possible, with or without this project. That's how bad I see the impacts of eutrophication in the town of Harwich. So, some big public policy questions, some big decisions on using public funds. I think some great habitat restoration is going to happen here. So that's kind of how I feel about that. Back to fish passage, I think the team did a fantastic job just discussing some of the concerns I had and then modifying the plans to address those concerns. So I can talk about things that folks want, but otherwise I'm very happy with the modifications they made to improve the flow of water from fish passage at the pond inlets and outlets, as well as reducing some of the potential for the woody debris to block fish passages over time. So I think that's a real plus. I did want to ask about water control, and I feel bad I didn't bring it up last time. Is there a water control plan as part of the NOI, or is that coming later?
That's something the contractor will develop. They'll develop a water control plan. What we typically see in the permits in terms of the conditions in the NOI and in the DEP permits is no active construction in the actively flowing stream. And so the contractor will develop a method of achieving that we will review and that the owner will approve.
Right. I'm always concerned about that approach because it's post-permits. And so the permit authorities don't have as much ability to comment on the water control plan if we leave it up to a bidding process, which can be influenced by the experience of the company, the reality of having so much funding. So I'm a little concerned about that. I don't know if we don't see projects like this, so I don't know if we get that involved in water control. But our interest would be to not have existing species, like Mark mentioned, impacted while things are happening. I think bypass pipes are probably preferred over pumping.
Right. The benefit of these projects is that they're big. The area is big, and there are already ditches along the edges. So typically what we've seen is the contractor will, before rerouting the water anywhere, they'll dig a ditch along the perimeter of the whole project and make that wide enough to convey all the water that they need to. And because it's so flat, there's no real need to line that with anything because it's not mobilizing any, gravel or sand or anything. So then once they have that in place, then they just move the water over to that bypass channel and they do the work everywhere else.
Yeah.
And when they're done with the new channel, they put it back in.
Yeah, you shouldn't need like bypass pipes or things like that. They
You
can,
got room, you got space.
they have room, and like Nick said, the topography is really low that you just dig a little and it diverts. But
So,
I'd like to see it though, like for our own knowledge, not necessarily that we would have say, but to see what that plan would be.
Right. I'm familiar with the state and federal process, and so I know there'll be other agencies that have a crack at it. If I wasn't, I would say I'd want to see a draft water control plan to come to us, but I don't think we often go to that level of detail. But either way, I thank you for that. I think the space is going to allow you to be flexible and
Yeah.
allow fish and things to move up and down. And then I had a comment on the stone riffle. Do you want to describe we talked about it, and it sounds like we're pretty good with it, but you want to just describe the length of it, the slope, and then the size of the stones that'll be in there?
Sure.
And for those people who don't know, who might be here or listening, to say what a riffle is.
Sure. So a riffle is, it's a portion of the river that is typically a little bit faster flowing, usually has a little bit coarser material on the stream bed. It's usually where you see sort of the white water of the river. In these river systems, there's really no white water, but this particular, and so often when we design riffles into stream systems like this, it is often either for habitat opportunity for to create these riffle pool ecosystems, which this stream system is not. This is a really flat wetland system. Or it's to provide some degree of scour protection to infrastructure, which might be within that area or further upstream. In this particular case, I'm looking at sheet 4 of the design drawings right now. The riffle that Brad is referring to is the portion of stream just upstream of the pond that's in paper over there. There we go.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. So to the west of the pond that you see in cell 2, the stream channel will steepen up just a little bit to get to the existing stream bed elevation that's in the ditch adjacent to cell 1. What we don't want to have happen is we don't want to have a lower stream bed elevation through there with no sort of control, and then have sand be washed from the existing channel upstream down into the pond, and then potentially create a fish passage issue at the road crossing. We don't want to create what is called a perched culvert, where the culvert is higher in elevation than the stream bed further downstream. So we want to allow water and fish to be able to move through that culvert easily. In this slightly steeper stream channel, you'll notice in the longitudinal profile on the bottom of that sheet, it's at about 1%. So if any of us go out there, we're not likely to notice much of a difference. There might be, at some flows, there might be slightly faster water, but you probably won't notice it. The length of that, it looks like it's about 200 feet long. So it goes underneath that first ADA crossing between cell 1 and 2, and then connects further upstream into that existing ditch. That will be the stream bed will be consistent of, we haven't designed the size of the material, but based on the volume of flow, which, as Brad has said before, is very low for the most part, it's not mobilizing very big material. So this is probably in the 3-inch rounded stone size, not angular riprap or anything. This is going to be rounded river stone, essentially, a mix of 3-inch gravel and smaller gravel and sand mixed in there. So it'll just look like a natural stream bed. It will not be, in the cross sections that you see in the designs, it'll look like a trapezoid, a flat bottom, and then angled banks. But in our final typical details of the final designs and in construction, there'll be a low point in that channel, so that even if we have, 1 CFS, 1 cubic foot per second of water flow or less, that water will be concentrated in that middle of the channel, so you have as much water depth as possible for fish to be able to navigate that.
Thank you for that. All right, I guess a couple other quick ones. The boardwalk, just an opportunity to say that, new structures in the 0 to 50 and the resource area, I think this is a good example of where we would allow a variance for handicap hardship. So I just wanted to make that point. This will need a variance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, so I think this is a great example of where we would want to grant a variance to that no new structures bylaw. And lastly, I forgot to ask this question. So back to your thoughts, Mark. Got a question for Ed on the nitrogen concentrations. In a year like this, we don't have a lot of surface flow, and so groundwater's not pushing up as much as it might. Is there a gradient to nitrogen concentrations from surface flows down to groundwater? And within groundwater, does it decline, does it increase, or is it just uniform?
I'll take a shot at answering. I'm not sure I understand your question, Brad, but
Well, we're trying to attenuate this nitrogen and get rid of, we have PMDL. Is the attenuation gonna just occur with surface flows? And I think that the answer is yes. And then, how does nitrogen that's at gradient going downward, how does that interact with surface flows? Are we gonna see?
all right.
You know what I'm talking about? Are we confident we're
Well,
gonna have removal of everything that's flowing through here?
So the streams are collection points, and so groundwater comes up into those streams, and you're going to get nitrogen attenuation in that phoretic zone that is, because there's the tendency to have a mixture of different kinds of fines and carbon and everything else. So you're going to get some attenuation that's occurring there. Then once it gets into the stream, we're going to get into, we're going to go through the diversity of different habitats. So we're going to have those different kinds of wetlands surrounding the larger basins. And then it's going to go down into the salt marsh, where you're going to have a different set of plants and opportunities for different kinds of attenuation, in large part because you're going to have different more sources of carbon actually down in the salt marsh. So you're going to get attenuation both in the aquifer system, coming into the streams, and as the water flows through the streams and through the different kinds of communities.
Yeah, so I guess, we're not clicking here. So I'm talking about at depth. Can we expect full circulation of the nitrogen load that's occurring in the groundwater with surface flows? You just described how we're gonna have attenuation with these different habitats with surface flows. Can we expect to have full circulation of that at depth nitrogen load up to the surface? Or in a year like this, is it really kept down and not coming to the surface?
Well, I'm still not necessarily getting your question, but let me take a shot. So,
is this project gonna just take the surface flows, and there's gonna be this whole lens of groundwater movement towards the harbor that it doesn't treat?
No, that's not true, because it's going to go through all those different plant communities, and you're going to be exposed to different levels of carbon in each of those communities. And then you're going to have the idea in the ponds is that you're going to slow flow in those areas so that you have a different habitat in there that's going to have opportunities for deposition of our particulate nitrogen and the usual kind of attenuation that you get in a pond. So in a low groundwater year, you tend to have the nitrogen, just like in a high groundwater year, sort of focused in a sort of relatively shallow portion of the aquifer. So anything that's coming up is going to tend to have a lot of that same amount of nitrogen. Now the question is, in a low groundwater year, your flow is going to drop. The question is, once the flow drops, do your nitrogen concentrations go up and you have a wash in terms of the load? I think what we have found is that it pretty much follows that sort of characteristic. I'd have to go back and double check our baseline analysis, but that, that's the sort of thinking is that if you have these habitats during the summertime, when they're actively growing and actively have deposition of particulates and that sort of thing, that you're going to have the enhanced attenuation if it's high groundwater or low groundwater years.
Can I add to that, Brad?
Sure.
So I think, the active stream flow is coming underneath Bank Street. We know that that's very little during some portions of the year or even non-existent. And as Ed explained earlier, most of the groundwater lens is sort of coming from the north into what we're calling here cells 3 and 5. Cell 5 is that pine tree area right now, and then also cell 7, which is just to the east of that. In those 3 bog cells, we have a few of those open water ponds. So even if there's no active stream flow coming underneath Bank Street, that groundwater will be coming into those ponds and will fill up to whatever elevation the groundwater is. And so those ponds, and we've seen these on other projects also, these wetlands, even during droughts, they stay extraordinarily wet. I'm always surprised by that. And so those ponded areas, they're 6 feet deep. So you would have to have your groundwater level drop by more than 6 feet to have, total dried out ponds and no nitrogen attenuation in those ponds. So as we get that groundwater in, it's going to be circulating in that pond and doing that work that it does.
Clarify a little bit?
A little bit, but it brings another question. So through this all, with a lack of dilution in a dry year, wouldn't that make the nitrogen factor more concentrated? And wouldn't that give the opportunity of the habitat to work a little bit harder, possibly more effectively?
That's a great question. And, you kind of referring to if that water is kind of isolated in the pond, does it have a chance to just kind of circulate and denitrify right there?
Well, it's a collection point.
Right, because it's not being washed through. Ed, I'll ask you as well, as you slow that water down and as if there's no water flowing through those ponds, if it's just sort of an isolated pond, that's doing quite a bit of nitrogen attenuation, right?
Well, yeah. So if you've got lower groundwater, you've got more concentrated nitrogen that's going to end up in those ponds because the residence time is going to be longer in those ponds. So the water is going to be held in the pond a longer time. That's going to increase your residence time. It has the opportunity to increase your nitrogen concentrations. The flip side is that the ecosystems in those situations, if they're healthy, are doing, they're able to handle that. They're happier to have more nutrients, and they'll do a better job of actually removing it, probably because it's in there longer. So it's not as simple, if you've got more nitrogen, it's going to be sort of static in terms of the nitrogen removal. If you get warmer conditions and longer residence times, it's actually going to tend to do a better job of removing nitrogen.
Good question, Mark.
Stan, you have any questions? I just had a couple that sort of followed. Most of them already been covered. The first one, do you have an inventory of the species that are presently in this area?
Believe Mike can speak to this more. Maybe there was a vegetation survey done a few years ago.
07 and 2017.
So 2017 was the latest vegetation survey of the site.
Okay.
So we have it's a long list of species that are there, but we have a pretty good understanding of the vegetation species. Yep.
Flora and fauna?
just vegetation for that. I don't think, and there's been the box turtle tracking. Any other animal survey?
So dragonflies, damselflies.
Okay.
So, no, I guess is the answer really, right? Other than
There's
box turtle.
not a comprehensive fauna survey, but the flora survey is fairly comprehensive. But Mike was saying that they have, dragonflies that they've identified out there and some other insects as well.
Don't you see some value in having a survey of what other fauna might be in there right now? And what survives this process?
I guess I would ask the question, what would that gain the project, or what would that gain the ecosystem in the end, and how
Help us understand what we lose. If
how
certainly-
challenging would that be? We know there's turtles and frogs. It'd be really hard to, I think, identify the number of each of those that are out in that system. But it hasn't been done to date.
So we don't know, for example, if there's any spotted salamanders in there or something which might be at risk.
You would, so something like a spotted salamander, that should have been, if it was a concern, then that would have came up for natural heritage, because that's a species that they would be concerned about. Spotted salamanders are typically more attracted to vernal situations, which is not what you have here.
No, I understand.
But I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, so any of the listed species, rare or threatened, are generally mapped by natural heritage, and so they would flag those for us.
Yeah, I think it's just a missed opportunity not to know what the impact will be between what we have today and what we're going to have tomorrow.
Sure.
On the wildlife that resides in that area. I look at the Herring River as an example, sort of somewhat close to what we're doing here, in some respects anyhow. And there's a certain area of the river that's north of the West Reservoir that in this time of year especially, you don't even see the river. I mean, it's completely overgrown. I noticed a lot of the bordering areas along the proposed, the new river that will be here, or the reconstructed one, are marsh. I mean, do you anticipate, is there a plan to prevent that similar kind of overgrowth and basically choking of the river to take place here?
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we were discussing with Brad, to try to make some modifications to the design drawings to limit that. So that was the reason for the update of the drawings, was to limit that possibility. Certainly the trust is going to be, observing this site and looking for that. But there's no current plan to clean it out or anything like that right now.
They'd have to also come back to us for, that's not being proposed right now, so we have to wait to see what it actually turns out to be in a few years and go from there in terms for maintenance activities.
I would like to discuss when the time's right, a condition that would require, some process for X number of years to look at pond outlets, the inlets, the rock riffle, and just have the owner take a look, photograph, and then if things are not right, fix them.
Yeah.
So we should discuss that as a group, but I don't know what the right parameters are, but I think it's important to have something like that. And just to follow up, I mean, they did a survey on swamp loosestrife, which is really interesting because I guess we need to protect the swamp loosestrife because it's a place for moths. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Not purple loosestrife, different.
Right.
Right, the swamp to me is one of the more aggressive channel changers in coastal Massachusetts. It's the one that we battle all the time that just, it takes over rivers. What's north of the reservoir is swamp loosestrife. And it just, they used to bring hydro dredges in there years ago to clean that out, and it hasn't been done in a while. But so it's interesting, one agency's working hard to protect the swamp loose drive, and I think it's gonna be one of the species we have to keep an eye on in this location in the future.
Yeah, I just hate to see all this time and energy and effort and money and everything else go into this without a plan to maintain it going forward.
I am confident, you know, we should have a condition, I feel strong, but I think that HCT, they do this kind of work all over. They work with the Department of Natural Resources in town, you know, assemble volunteers to go out a couple times a year and look at things and just keep junctions open. So I think the model's there to make things happen. I think it'd be prudent for us to have some initial condition that says, okay, at these locations, we need to hear back from you on how things are, and if things aren't right, you know, fix them.
Except if you have to find the money to fix them too.
Well, I think a lot of this is manual.
A lot of it's manual labor.
Yeah, I think it's not that difficult.
Well, you say, we used to do some maintenance on the Herring River and it just hasn't been done.
Right, bigger system, and, you know, the Department of Natural Resources does a fair amount in the Herring River. I think that stretch above the reservoir is particularly difficult. The cranberry bogs used to maintain that, maybe not so much for river herring, but for the water access. And they would dredge that out with hydro dredges periodically. That just isn't done right now.
Yeah. You mentioned the process as the construction is going on, that the guy in the backhoe sees a turtle in his bucket, he'll get out and he'll remove it. Seems awfully casual to me, you know, as opposed to having some, you know, I look at our, when we rake the beaches to protect the plovers, you know, we've got somebody there, a monitor that looks for that stuff. And again, I think that's a shortcoming.
I think that would be the case for listed species, for sure, like the plover.
Has to be somebody out
And the
of
box
Yeah.
turtle. So
Yeah.
there will be that for the box turtle. And we will be there for much of construction. And if we're not there, there's likely one of the other project partners that will be on site. So during construction, there's generally somebody on the design or project partner team there to help interpret the drawings for the contractor, but also to be checking the erosion control that's on site and checking things like that.
Okay, all right, good. And then I guess the last question is probably an obvious one, but I assume the contractors are gonna be doing this work or experienced in this kind of work?
Yes, so there have been, I guess almost, you know, there've been 7 or 8 constructed to date of these types of bog projects. And when we go out to bid, we are typically asking for both, or evaluating on cost, but also we will typically, in the bidding documents, have some qualification requirements. So not necessarily does the contractor need to have done a cranberry bog restoration before, but we want to make sure that they understand water control plans, make sure that they understand erosion control plans, make sure that they know how to work on very challenging wetland systems.
Okay.
So nobody had done this kind of work before 2009. So, you know, the first contractor was trained to do it. They ended up doing a bunch more after that. There's been one other contractor that's done it. So there's 2 primary ones that have done these cranberry bog projects before. But they learned it when they hadn't done it before. And so I don't doubt that there are others that can, as long as they've demonstrated that they've done work in water before and they know how to work with water.
All right, good. I have no other questions. Just one last go around and see if anybody else has anything else they want to bring to the table.
Amy, are we able to move forward tonight without having?
We have had their input, so yes, we are. And we can put the condition that whatever condition they put on has to be satisfied prior to start of work.
So the comments, I think, have raised a number of questions, most of which I think have been answered, a couple of which perhaps, let me put it out, is anyone feel that they have outstanding issues that would suggest we shouldn't make a motion tonight, or is everyone relatively satisfied with the responses we've received? nothing.
I'm good myself. I do think we need some discussion, given the magnitude of this project, on some of the conditions.
Yeah.
So maybe not just typical conditions for this one.
No, definitely not. And I would, if we approve the project, I definitely want to run the draft by them who've done these projects before, too.
I did, just to, I
Yeah, you
did
sent.
provide a couple of
Yep.
example orders of conditions to
Mhm.
Amy from other projects. So you have a listing of ones from Falmouth and Mashpee, just
Mhm.
to use as an example.
Well, with that, can we have a motion then on this notice of intent?
Yes, I just have a question before I make a motion. How many of the conditions do we feel that we need to incorporate within the motion for approval?
I think it's gonna be done on a discussion, so I think you don't have to include them, just say we're gonna develop them.
Yeah, based on the conversations that we've had at these public meetings.
Okay.
We can't take anything, we can't put anything kind of new in that we haven't discussed, but we can put ones in there to clarify. So we'd say, the conditions based on our conversations in public hearing.
Okay, well, let me try it. Anybody can make some additions. Stan?
I just have a question, because you just said you have a whole list of typical conditions. So what if there are conditions that they have in their list that you haven't?
Well, I suggest we're not going to close the public hearing tonight. So that allows for discussion during the order of conditions meeting, which would be in 2 weeks. That would just pertain to conditions. So I recommend you do not close the public hearing. That allows us to have a little bit more flexibility.
Make copies of those others, and you can review
Yep,
them.
they were in Dropbox, but we'll happily we'll put them in for the next packet too.
Mark?
I'm not in support of moving on this tonight. I think there's issues that need to be clarified before we come to that point. I don't think we're there yet.
John?
Can you be more specific, Mark? What is it you think needs to be clarified before we can move on?
Just in general detail, questions that Brad had brought up, issues that Amy has brought up. I think there needs to be more in-depth discussion, and maybe a better general understanding. And I'm really disappointed that there's such a lack of public input. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people don't seem to be aware. I'm not sure I understand why that is. Maybe they don't read the papers. I don't know, but.
Mike, do you want to speak to?
Yeah, Mike, sure.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As a way to offer more feedback to your concern, Mark, about public awareness, the trust has distributed town-wide at least twice. I can look back at the various editions. A newsletter, 16-page newsletter, and reaching approximately 10,000 households on each town-wide distribution. The Harwich Conservation Trust publishes this newsletter semi-annually, so spring and the fall. And in those town-wide mailings, there have been feature articles about different aspects of this Coldbrook Eco Restoration Project. In addition, there have been multiple news articles, whether it's the Cape Codder or the Cape Cod Chronicle newspapers. There have actually been site visits of the Robert O. Smith Coldbrook Preserve, and to discuss eco restoration aspects. We held a presentation at the community center prior to COVID, and there is on our website, and has existed for several years, a resource page about the Coldbrook Eco Restoration Project. That's at our website, harwichconservationtrust.org, including a video, aerial video, and a description of the project. There was also an interview by the local Cape and Islands NPR station just a couple weeks ago. We've also discussed the project on local cable access channel 18. So there have been many, many times that we have provided information about the project through these different platforms, media outreach, and yet, of course, some folks are just learning about it, and that is not unusual to me. But I do want to express that we have been very forward-thinking and proactive in our educational outreach in as many ways as possible to as many constituencies as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. I would acknowledge what you said, Mike, and I followed most of what you just explained. And I guess in general, I'm just surprised that more people haven't. And honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed that it doesn't seem to be as in the forefront of as many minds as I thought there might be. Because it is such a big undertaking, and it's going to have a big impact on an area that, you know, probably 85% of the people see every week. So
I think that they just, I mean, whether or not people read it, what they get something in the mail or follow things, it seems like they've reached out to as many outlets as they possibly can to get that information to people. So whether or not people pay attention to it, unfortunately, is they can't control that.
I understand that, and I recognize that, and I applaud their efforts, because generally, I think you've done a very good job of making it available to the public. But I guess I'm just overtaken by the lack of participation from the public. So I guess that's my point.
Maybe they need a big sign on Bank Street. Future site of the,
Eco restoration,
Why not?
you never know.
it gets a lot of traffic down that street.
Yes, it does.
I'd just like to say, I don't support further delay here. I think we should move here. And I think Mark has identified risks, and there are risks here, and you can talk about various kinds of risks. I think there's also big risk in doing nothing, and it isn't just about, in my view, nitrogen attenuation, although that's clearly an important part of this, but it's about general ecological degradation on Cape Cod, and this is a discrete, well-defined opportunity to address some of that, to counter some of the extensive development that's happened on Cape Cod over many decades. And I think we need to move ahead on this. And I also think that another way of dealing with risk in particular is diversity. And what I mean by diversity is just pursuing a single solution to the nitrogen pollution problem is probably the wrong thing to do. And what I mean by a single solution is sewering. And as we all know, sewering is not happening everywhere in Harwich, and there are probably risks associated with depending on sewering only. There are risks in raising money and paying for the sewering. There's risks in getting it done. This is an opportunity to introduce a different and pretty independent approach to establishing a means for nitrogen attenuation. And we don't fully understand, as you've pointed out, exactly what that's going to get us, but I think it's very important for us to pursue that sort of diversity and try something that hasn't been done as much as other easily understood things like sewering. I think it's a critical thing, actually, for us to pursue here. So I fully support moving today as opposed to holding back and looking for more answers. I'm not sure we're going to find the answers, and I don't think we can afford to wait.
Mr. Chairman, can I make just a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. So I think I just wanted to bring the commission back to something. So it is our job as a Conservation Commission to determine whether the project has an adverse impact to wetlands as under the Wetlands Protection Act or the bylaw. The nitrogen attenuation piece is an important piece to the overall project, in that that's how it was, you know, portrayed to the public. And certainly as private citizens of this town, you're also, of course, to be concerned about this. But when it comes to our evaluating the project and our making a vote and determination on the project, it is whether or not this project will have a positive or negative impact to the wetland resource areas. So there's two, in my mind, two very separate things. We're having a big conversation about nitrogen, which is of course important, but it is not necessarily part of the wetlands review of this project. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, fair point, Amy, I appreciate that. I would suggest that we put it to a motion, and see who is comfortable with moving forward on this, and anyone that is not can voice their opposition to it.
Okay, I will make a motion that we approve the request for a notice of intent for the Coldbrook Preservation Project map at the Coldbrook Preserve, map 23, parcels C3-2, C1-0, and C1-1, with the conditions that we have discussed at this meeting this evening.
I'll second.
Seconded. Now let me ask, all in favor?
Well, discussion, please.
Discussion then.
I think we really need to talk about conditions. So let's, get them on the table. There's some we're going to see for the next meeting. We'll evaluate it, but I'll just lay out the one I have that I think is important for this site, and that is that the project should, for 3 years, monitor the conditions of the stream channels at the pond inlets and outlets, as well as the riffle, the stone riffle, report back to the commission on those conditions, and identify any issues that impede water flow or fish passage, and discuss corrections with the commission. So 3 years, 3 annual reports, and so it's kind of an enhanced certificate of compliance with the language that corrections were required.
Why 3 years, Brad?
I don't know if we should talk about the duration, but at some point, you can't hold a property, in perpetuity to do this work. I picture the 3 years of monitoring would evolve into a cooperative plan with HCT, Department of Natural Resources, volunteers, and they'll just take care of this site like is done at, Skinnequit Pond, Herring River. So I think it's gonna be very much a mutually agreeable thing, but I just think that the level of disruption is so large that it's important to have a little more language than you would normally put in. Obviously, we'll balance draft language, you folks, and look for ideas, but I think it's important for this site, but I don't know, is there any precedent to going beyond 3 years, or, 5 years?
You could say 3 years with the possibility to extend.
To me, the solution is not gonna be hard. I just see manual adjustments. I think it's going to be very feasible, but I just think that this level of disruption, this level of public resources, which really is in our purview, but I think it's important to have a safeguard like this.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Is that being proposed, Brad, as an amendment to the motion that's on the floor?
No, it's a condition. I think it's important to have that condition discussed.
Okay, and I'm not disagreeing with you substantively. I'm just wondering administratively if that's part of the motion, or whether that's part of the order of conditions that Amy is going to develop that we'll discuss at the next meeting.
It is, but I think it's significant enough, and maybe others that is significant enough, that it should preclude the vote.
In other words, that we shouldn't vote on it until we hear the order of conditions?
No.
Just,
Okay, I'm just confused.
we often have under discussion on conditions, and
Right.
we hammer out ideas like that, so
Yeah.
I just thought that was.
So the
one.
minutes will reflect that
Yes.
should be, that will be noted in the order of conditions.
There's no way we're gonna capture all the conditions just talking here, but if these are the important ones that you wanna talk about now, we can bring them up. They'll be in this discussion, they'll make it into the orders. which I will provide you a comprehensive set of.
Other concerns? The motion stands and has been seconded. I'll put it to a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
No, I'll agree.
You're in favor, Mark?
Yeah.
All right. The motion carries. Gentlemen, thank you very much for
Thank
your
you very much.
time and patience tonight.
Thank you all for your focus and attention and questions and patience in this process and support. Thank you.
Think
Thanks,
about
Mike.
that sign on Bank Street.
Yeah, and personally, as a member of the commission, I would like to thank the applicant and all the members of the commission. This has been a fantastic education for me.
Very, very informative.
And I would like to volunteer to be the one to stand in front of the excavator and help all those turtles. That doesn't sound like a bad day to me. So,
Yes, sir.
just announce who you are, that's all. I know.
I'm Tom Evans, I'm president of the trust, and I'm a layman, I'm not a scientist, but I've sat in on virtually all of the meetings over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and I've learned a lot about this project and the ways in which it can be very precise and in the ways in which this is new and experimental, and John, to your point, represents something that we really need to do for Cape Cod. But to the issue of sort of how public this project is, we know we've got to get this right. And we have to get it right for the trust, we have to get it right for the town, for the Conservation Commission, and for precedent, because there will be others following. The trials and tribulations of the cranberry farmers are well known. So we want to work with all of the key parties to do everything we possibly can to get it right. And we recognize that this is perhaps the most public project you folks will ever approve. Because I'm speaking now as a former member of the Conservation Commission so many years ago that I hate even to admit it. But most of what you look at are residential properties, where sometimes people are trying to pull a fast one on you. We're never going to try to pull a fast one on anybody, because that's not who we are. And we recognize that this is happening in the center of Harwichport. And everybody's going to have an opinion, and we're going to need to be mindful of those opinions, especially, Mark, as the project unfolds and people realize, oh my God, this really is a big deal, when they will not have seen that before. But I've been to the Coonamessett project. I hope perhaps others of you have been able to see that. It's a remarkable transformation, and over a very short period of time. So thank you for your support. But I just want you to understand, we appreciate your involvement in this, your efforts to help us get it right, and that's our intention.
Thank you.
Thank you. You go make sure our cohorts know they can come in.
Fascinating discussion.
It really was. And-
I couldn't hear.
Like I said publicly, I really learned through this.
But I'm a little
Well, it's true, and I'm very disappointed that I didn't more participation. People that would be concerned about. Yeah. There were a handful of them. Very, very little feedback from the public.
Excuse me. It's been a long day. All right.
Okay.
Oh, were they good?
find something to do out there, Wayne?
Oh, weird.
All right, next item we have on the agenda is the discussion and possible vote on 2 Harvest Hollow, respect on unpermitted fence. Amy?
Yeah, so yesterday we received correspondence from Hamlin Consulting, which is in the new packet of information I gave you tonight somewhere. We're not going to discuss that tonight. I'm inclined to agree, however, I want to fact check a few things that, that Lynn put in there about this not really being a coastal bank, and instead just being floodplain. They're not present tonight. I told Ernie on site visits and John, we quickly mentioned this, and I think just to be consistent, we want to fact check it, because this opinion that's supposedly based on a superseding order and conversations with DEP could have implications for future projects. So we just got it yesterday. I asked them if they would mind waiting another 2 weeks, and they said that was fine. So we don't need to vote because it's just a discussion item.
Good, thank you. And the last item we have is the discussion on the future use of the Main Street bogs at 374 Main Street.
Okay, so after our last meeting, and I did print out the deed, I know you have it, but for readily available, I printed out copies of the deed as well as the way, the warrant article for the town, if anybody wants one, we can pass those around. Keep one for myself. At the last public discussion we had about this, said really would be good to have kind of a meeting of the minds between the town, with town council, administration, myself on your behalf, and actually I probably should invite Ernie, and then the tech as well as their representation, as well as the current lessee to be involved. Not necessarily in the future, but just to know what's going on. And I sent off an email quickly after that last discussion and asked to have that meeting. And I was told that first, what administration would like to do is just to have a meeting with me. Said I'm happy to do that, and we're trying to set a time up that works.
Okay.
So unfortunately, I don't have any more updates from you from that. I will, again, try to make an effort to have that meeting happen. I did talk with Superintendent Sanborn, and he is still very much interested in pursuing being able to do an IMA on this property if the town is willing to put forth the effort in collaboration. Be that seeing what they can do as existing or pursuing legislation. So I don't have any more information from you. I think what I would like to ask though is, November is when the current lease is up. Do we want to have a public, this is just a discussion in preparation for what I would envision is a public hearing on what we're gonna do with the property. But correct me if I'm wrong with that assumption. We don't have to commit to one certain thing, but are you gonna put it back out for lease? Are we going to try to work towards the end with the IMA with the tech for the next year or something like that, however long it's gonna take? I think there needs to be, also for the current lessee, there needs to be guidance.
Well, I'm not sure a public hearing will provide any guidance.
No, it probably gets so far in the weeds with everybody having a suggestion that
Okay.
people go around in
I
circles
just-
forever.
I wasn't prepared to have a discussion of that magnitude tonight because I still haven't had the meeting that I need to have.
There's just so many unknowns right now. Everything is just sort of
Yeah, I
back to
am,
square one, it seems.
I haven't heard from either of the councils yet, which we really need to hear from.
So, just for information, I don't understand the timing here at all. If we decided we wanted to put the thing out for lease, what's the lead time for setting that up and executing it, just for us? Is this something that would take a month or two, or is it a year-long process?
Depends on the parameters you want to put on it. If you want to take the old lease agreement, which I have a copy of, which is antiquated, but if you wanted to pursue something very similar, it could be done rather quickly. If you wanted to put different parameters on it, that would be more. And also, we have to look at, something else to look at is whether the current practices that are happening out there would be allowable practices under the self-help grant. Because the whole way we acquired the property was very specific about what could be done. and how things were to be done. And we need to ensure before we put it out to lease again, if we were to put it out to lease to allow somebody to continue that practice that has been happening there in a certain way, you have to make sure that practice is compliant.
So what I hear in what you're saying
Not sure.
is part of the process would be legal review, and that could be less than entirely clear.
Correct. Clear as mud.
Can I say something? Or no?
Yeah.
Just a question. We're the board, we're the conservation board. Let's just take everything out the window that we, up to this date, we don't know anything. We got a piece of property, it's 33 acres, cranberry bogs. The lease has expired. We need to do something. Okay, it's a cranberry bog. That's our goal. Let's lease it out. Let's just put it out to lease. Don't make it overcomplicated. Take and use what was there and put it back out to lease in that fashion. I'm just saying, instead of getting to all these legalese and all this stuff, leases have been conveyed in this town for 40, 50 years on cranberry bogs that the town has owned. It shouldn't be this difficult. And I'm just saying, speaking to a lease versus legalese and all these other things. Just my opinion.
Yeah, maybe it would be helpful if I just read the section, which is only a short paragraph, that puts the restriction on the property based on the funding that was provided by the state to acquire the property. The section says, there is hereby established a Cape Cod open space land acquisition program for the purpose of acquiring land and interest in land for the protection of public drinking water supplies, open space, and conservation land, and the creation of walking and bicycle trails, and the creation of recreation areas. Those are the only purposes that the land can be used for. So if we put out, if we go to put out a lease, if we go to put out an RFP or whatever for a new lease, it has to be within those parameters as the proposed use.
What are you reading from right there?
Yeah.
I'm reading from the Acts, this is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Acts of 1998, Chapter 293, Section 2.
The motion from the Finance Committee, when they appropriated the money for that purchase, it has the word agricultural in there.
Yeah, no, I know, I read that in the
But it also
deed.
says Self-Help Act,
Yeah.
which is
In
what
the
he's
deed,
quoting.
but it also, in the quitclaim deed, it says premises may be used only for the purposes set forth in Chapter 293 of the Acts of 1998.
Ah, okay.
So there is a little bit of a conflict there, and,
Yeah.
you know, I read that too when I was reading that before. But, so, I mean, my opinion is that before we take any action or have any further discussion, we have to know whether or not the town and Cape Cod Tech want to pursue a legislative approach towards allowing Cape Cod Tech to do what they want to on the property, in which case then the town can go ahead and lease it to Cape Cod Tech.
Yeah,
But I
my
think-
feeling is we should stay with the Cape Cod Tech until they get this worked out.
Until they
Yeah.
make a determination as to which way Cape Cod Tech and the town wants to go. If they decide not to go the legislative route, then we can let the lease expire and we can put out an RFP for a new lease.
Is that text you have there, is it anywhere that's accessible to the rest of
We
us?
can make it available, that's
I
fine.
can,
That's just the
yeah, I can give
Self-Help
this
Act.
to Amy and she can make copies or,
Or
but
can you
it,
just, I can look it up on the website.
yeah, just look it up under Mass General Laws, Acts of, it's Chapter 293 of the Acts of 1998.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
I think, so I have no problem admitting when something is over my knowledge and ability level. The complexity of this is above my knowledge. I think I would like council to come talk to this group about what your options could be.
Good idea.
And just to you, not to, and it can be the same council that we're, talking with, or it could be Amy Questle, who's a land use attorney. But I think a land use attorney needs to tell you what your options are using the current language of self-help grants to help you better frame this. I don't feel comfortable in my knowledge base to make recommendations to you.
That's a good idea.
So I can see when they're available.
But has administration suggested that they want to do
I'm gonna
some
ask.
front running on this?
Yep, but we need some motion on this, so maybe that will help push things along. I have to put a request in for legal counsel, they'll see it, they'll probably say, hey, what are we doing? And it'll at least start the conversation. But I think it might expedite our discussions as well.
Yeah, you know what the facts are.
So
Run with it.
I can put it on, we'll tentatively put it on next time's agenda for further discussion. It may be ready by then. They may be able to come, they may not. But I'd like to get it on that agenda. I don't want us to spin our wheels more than we already have, so. And that's partially on, I'm trying to, facilitate this as best as I can, but I need some help.
Focus on it, Amy, is the thing with the timeline that we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just suggest that if we do follow Amy's suggestion, which I think is a good suggestion, that we do that in an executive session.
That's fine, because we can do executive session for that.
All right. Okay. Anything else on that, Amy?
I don't have anything for you now, so we're really hoping to have more. We don't have minutes.
Yep.
We will get more to you. So poor Melissa was, she suffers from migraines as I do and many other people, so she was out for a bit, and then, we've just been straight out, so. The minutes took a back burner this past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
She's doing great.
Good. Who's doing great?
Well, I mean, just Melissa, as far as getting us caught up, is doing an incredible job overall.
Good, thank you. Any other questions, comments, issues people want to bring up?
I feel like I had something. Oh. Sorry, I'm not a deadpan in face or words. I can't discuss it. We have to do it in executive session. Are you available for an executive session, either remotely on the computer or in person here on Friday at noon? We received a superseding order from Mass DEP about 28 Wawatasi, which is a project we denied. So we received a superseding order. We have to respond. We got it today. It was sent out on the 27th. We got it today. And we have to, if you want to make a response to this, which I will tell you the details of in executive session, we need to do so by Wednesday, which means I would either need to meet with you Monday or Friday or Monday, and Monday is like completely booked for me.
Can we all review that document?
In executive session, yes.
Why not otherwise?
I can't disseminate it.
Really?
I can ask, but that's never been the practice, is that I give it to you in executive session.
Pretty big-
I'll ask.
Pretty big issue, really.
Let me double check. I might be able to put a caveat on there, like not to be disseminated executive session material, and send it, blind copy each of you, so we can't respond to all and stuff.
This Friday or next Friday?
Oh, next Friday's too late. It has to be this Friday or Monday, but I can't. Monday is, I already have a lunchtime meeting on Monday. I've already booked every single meeting.
Amy, can it be any other time on Friday except for noontime?
I can go check my calendar real quick.
Yeah, could you, because I can't do noontime, I could do earlier in the day or later.
I might be able to do it like first, like 8:30.
Yeah, I mean, I could do 8:30
Let me go check my.
or
my
9 or whatever,
Probably can.
but I just
And if
can't
need
do
be, there might
noontime.
be a thing or two I can move, but some of the things I have are.
Okay, fine, thank you.
It's interesting that the letter from DEP should be a public document. It shouldn't require executive session. Maybe there's a response that does. I don't know. DEP's order is not gonna be, that's a public document. walkway?
Yes, it is. Yep. No dock. Oh,
Landing,
landing, yes.
training wheels to a
Yeah.
dock.
Yeah.
Brett, refresh my recollection, is that the one that we met on site?
Yes, with Brian Wall. Yes.
So, I cannot do first thing, but Melissa might be able to run it. Or I could do,
Oh, yeah.
I could do 10:30. I have something at 9 that I have to be at. So I could start you off at 8:30, if you want to start at 8:30, and Melissa could run you through everything. Basically, it doesn't take a lot of explanation, the paperwork says it all. So if you want to do 8:30, then we can make that work.
I'm good for 8:30.
This is informative for our purposes. There's no action to be taken.
Yeah,
here.
you have to determine whether or not you're gonna go along with the superseding order if you wanna appeal it. But the appeal, if you choose to appeal, we just need to file an appeal notice. We don't have to provide all the information at that time. We just have a certain amount of time to physically appeal. It's a one-page thing.
All right, so our purpose then is to determine if we want to appeal or not.
Is
Yes.
this enough time for posting for
Yeah,
all of us being a quorum?
We actually posted it today, in anticipation. Now granted, so the rule is 48 hours, so we were a little shy. We did post it today preemptively. But it is 48 hours or as soon as you possibly can. Being is that it is a time-sensitive thing, we almost don't have much other option. I mean, 'cause they have to receive it within 10 days. No, has to be postmarked within 10 days.
If you could check on that requirement, Amy, because if it's a letter from DEP, I think it's a public document. I think that it could be disseminated. So.
No, I will.
Yeah, check and see, because I can't make Friday, and I'd like to read it if I can, so I can at least chime in if possible.
I could try Monday. I could see what I've got Monday.
And can we do
How-
it remotely?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we would have absolutely no problem with notice. I mean, I don't think we'd have a problem with notice anyways because it's an emergency situation.
So if we can disseminate the document in advance or as quickly as possible.
Yeah,
And
how's,
then, yeah, anybody that, well, we'll try for Friday, but other than that, then.
well, it sounds like we have a couple,
I'm open.
I'm open.
I can do Friday morning.
So
I
yeah,
can't do, well, Monday is.
I think you do
I
it.
think I can disseminate it, Brad. I think I just have to put the caveat that you can't disseminate.
Ones I've been dealt with in the past, the document, is sent, I mean, consultants get it, it's sent out to, yeah, just
Yeah.
check if you can, because I could do Monday, but it sounds like everyone can make Friday, so you might as well
Okay.
go ahead. But I wouldn't mind at least being able to send you an email on.
No, of
top.
course.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I think
Brad.
that's fine as long as I put not a public document, not to, executive session material, not to disseminate.
So can I just ask for show of hands, who can make it on Friday morning?
At 8:30?
8:30.
Okay, so we're good, just, yeah.
Alright. And again, yeah, the rule is 48 hours or to the best of your ability prior, and we did already post a Friday preemptively today.
Will we be doing it in person or Zoom?
It is either. If you want to come in person, we're going to be in the small room that you were sitting in.
Yeah, so,
But we have a Zoom link.
okay. I'll be in the room
I'll be there.
All right, so 8:30.
Friday.
Sure.
So, Amy, looking at your crystal ball, I'd love to see if we had a chance, we've had a couple light meetings lately. If we did have light meetings, could we revisit the Bell's Neck Conservation Area Management Plan? A lot, I
Yep.
think, depends on your schedule and, everything else, but to me, that's one topic that, we voted on doing it, updating it, we haven't made progress. We've had tons of busy meetings, but lately we haven't.
Yeah.
So I just make a pitch for if we have a light meeting, maybe we can revisit that whole thing.
We can. I mean, I'm happy to put on any agenda. The agendas look light here, and that has been a blessing in a way for Melissa and I because the rest of our department has just been insane bonkers. So I can always put it on.
Well, what do you think in terms of big picture things? I love that we're working on the Herring River study. That's progressing.
Yeah, just so you guys know, we had a meeting about that last week with some people smarter than me about what should go in the RFP.
Yeah, and so that's a big ticket. And to me, that goes in management.
And Mark brought up the Thompson's Fields last time too, so I think land management in general needs to be discussed.
Along all these topics, I was gonna bring it up too, was can we have a subcommittee, or has there been a subcommittee to deal on these things? Because I think that's where we lose traction, is we have all this great discussion and then sometimes it falls off because we get so busy.
Yeah.
But if we had a subcommittee that could really focus in on what properties we have responsible for, you know, we talked about putting a gate in at the reservoir, and that could be automated. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we could put into one big plan. I'd be willing to, I know nobody, you know, everybody wants to give up their time, but I'd be willing to do that myself, because there's so much things that I think that we lose sight of. And I think the Herring River, going north of the Great Western Road, the invasive species that's going on there, it would help develop a capital plan. Then we could put an article together and say, hey, this is what we need to do in the town, and help Amy and her assistant out. And that's what I think. That's why I got on this board, is to try to
We had
improve
one
what
for
we
the
have.
Bellsman area. It
Yeah,
was
we had
Mark,
one for
Jim,
the,
and I.
yep.
I think this is more like a land management subcommittee.
Which is almost something similar to what we had, not in this committee, but we used to have a Trails and Land Management Committee, and the Trails Committee got disbanded. But I would,
I'd like to focus in on the whole thing, that not just one area, but everything that we have, you know, the
Oh,
gardens.
prioritize.
The gardens down
Yeah.
on Sisson Road, Thompson's Field, Bell's Neck, Main
Mhm.
Street. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Well, we can get overwhelmed too, so I mean, I don't want to
I
go
would
too far
agree.
with that, but
I would also say
Need
this
to
commission has
prioritize.
voted to update the plan, and so that's actually something that progressed to that point. And so we have voted to update the plan. I'd like to revisit that sometime.
Yep.
I agree. I think what I would ask, Amy, if you could pull together an inventory of sort of open issues, for lack of a better term. Things like the Bell's Neck Gate.
Sure.
Plan. You know, we've talked about dogs in Thompson Field. I'm not sure where I am on that one anymore either. But, you know, there's a whole bunch of issues
A
there.
lot of times we
But
don't.
we lose
handle
track
it.
of them
Like,
because,
if we have a light meeting, let's tackle some of
yeah,
this.
yeah, it's unfortunately, it's turning into a moving target. We think of them and we talk a little bit about them and then we move on.
That's what
So-
I'm saying.
I can do that. We can put together a list. That's easy enough to do.
Yeah, and then perhaps we could assign them subgroups or something like that too. if we
Tackle different jobs.
Decide that's the best approach.
Okay. I will put the inventory on our next agenda.
Good. Other discussion items? New business, old business? Nothing. Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting of August 3rd, 2022.
Thank you, Wayne. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
2 things for you to sign, please.
Okay,